Alright guys, here we go. Topic 11 here, an era of change. We're going to start with sections 11.1 to 11.4. Looking at counterculture with hippies, dropouts, etc., 1960s and 70s. Counterculture there, kind of an opposite of the 1950s, kind of an opposite of, the stiff collar, upper class types, so forth. The 1950s consumerism, conformity, etc. Total opposite of that. Youth, spontaneity, individuality, spirituality, sexuality, and not trusting authority. Those are especially going to flourish with the civil rights movement happening, anti-war movements from Vietnam, going to kind of give rise to all that stuff. You're also going to have the generation gap kind of coming up here where kids are going to, teenagers, young adults are going to generally just feel like their older parents, their grandparents just don't understand the way they think and feel. It's that generation gap. They do have this idea of not trusting anyone over 30 that kind of comes about, especially with the Vietnam War, as the credibility gap widens in the Vietnam War and the government's not able to be believed as easily. Don't trust anyone over 30 kind of comes from the concept that most people in government are 30 years or older. Thus, anyone over 30 is not very trustworthy. Got some various hippie action going here a little bit, 60s and 70s. Talking about sex in the 60s and 70s here, you've got communes. These are going to be small groups of people getting together. They're going to live together, work towards a common good of sorts. They're going to share resources and interests. They're going to be kind of a counterculture movement to the 1950s nuclear family idea here. Very much not the father, mother, couple of kids, house, etc. Very counter to that. You've also got the free love movement here, where a lot of young people are going to openly discuss and have sex outside of marriage. So marriage is going to take a bit of a hit here in terms of its value to people in the 60s and 70s. Generally speaking, free love, the concept here, is going to be much more open in the 60s and 70s. Drugs, meanwhile, are going to make a pretty big run here with, there's several of them, marijuana, psychedelic drugs being a couple of the bigger ones. You're going to have this as kind of a way to revolt, get away, be creative, whatever, you name it. People are experimenting with drugs more than ever, probably. Spirituality also kind of blooms here a little bit. People looking at alternative religions, or just kind of getting in tune with their feelings, thoughts, beliefs, etc. Native American religions as well. Rock and roll is gonna be a great vessel for a lot of messages of the 60s and 70s. It's gonna display a lot of the counterculture movement. The Beatles, for instance, are going to be massive with a lot of their songs. Ed Sullivan, take note of this. Ed Sullivan show in '64, 70 million viewers. At the time, that's probably 35 to 40% of the entire population, which is massive. Psychedelic music's going to be there with the drugs mixing in there with the rock and roll. Art and literature, if you look at it there too, you can kind of see this. So all this stuff's going to have messages and values of the counterculture mixed into it here a little bit. So we did this here in class with all these different groups. We looked at the lyrics, and you can definitely see counterculture values in these songs. But moving ahead here, the dark side, with the sex aspect of it, there's going to be diseases spreading. People are less cautious than they probably would be in marriage, more partners, more, frequencies probably going to be up with a variety of people, etc. Sexual abuse is going to be a little bit more prevalent. Drugs, of course, can lead to addiction, death, especially with some of the harder drugs. Violence can be associated with rock and roll, angry, anti-government, anti-this or that type music. So you've definitely got that sort of stuff going on a little bit here. Just a few things to touch on here. You see all these concepts in, the songs, the poems, art, etc. Generally nice things about the counterculture, ideas of peace and love and civil rights movement, those are all great things. Downside, dropout rates, crime, they're all going to be up a little bit. Disease, whether it's from drugs or sex, is going to be up, and drug use, of course, is going to be up with death and addiction on the rise as well. So definitely some good and bad here in the art and counterculture. Women's rights, though, is going to move forward a little bit. You're going to see a second wave of feminism come in the 60s. First wave is more about the right to vote, but now that women have the right to vote, what do they want? Well, they want full equality with men, just entire equality. And they really want to kind of break out of that. Not everybody is, but as a whole, women want to break out of that, oh, you're just a housewife kind of thing, from the 1950s and beyond, and earlier. So they're kind of looking to make big strides here. Betty Friedan, with the housewife issue, she has this thought that she writes the book The Feminine Mystique, that there's a problem that doesn't actually have a name. But housewives, they're kind of unhappy, they're uneasy, and that it could possibly impact a woman's health, being mentally unhappy, maybe your physical well-being, etc., career as well. So that's what she's kind of about here, addressing the housewife issue and the feminine mystique. Um, You've got NOW, the National Organization for Women. Betty Friedan's a part of that, and their major goal is to end sex discrimination in the workplace and achieve full equality. And how they want to go about doing this is a constitutional amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment. This would be a nationwide law. However, it's going to not work. It's going to get rejected in large part because there's a movement to stop the Equal Rights Amendment, led by Phyllis Schlafly, who she and other women are going to sometimes be against this because they're kind of concerned that it's a conflict in terms of they've always known being a housewife, what's wrong with being a housewife. They kind of maybe feel a little bit that if the ERA is passed, that they will be looked down upon for choosing to be a housewife. So a lot of conservative values there are going to be challenged by the ERA, and thus people in support of those conservative values are going to oppose it. Title IX is a great thing that does happen in 72. No discrimination in athletics or education. Women can go to college, they can participate in sports, they can do both, etc. And again, a lot of this legislation coming from this time period that's about equality is building off of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Without that, you might not get a lot of this stuff here. Roe v. Wade, one of the most controversial decisions the Supreme Court's probably ever made. In 73, they grant the right to abortion for women, which is a great win for women's rights in terms of control over a woman's own body, over, her own choice as opposed to someone else controlling it for her. It is, however, very controversial, of course, because, there's people that say it kills children. You can see in the cartoons down there, or not cartoons, but the images down there, so it is a very controversial issue as well. Gloria Steinem and Phyllis Schlafly, Gloria Steinem definitely, feminist in the second wave sense, full equality. And Phyllis Schlafly thinking that, women's rights, full equality is going to be bad for women. So those are two kind of, other leaders, like Gloria Steinem and, of course, Phyllis Schlafly there. The various movements here, just kind of touching on some of these. Latino rights. This will kind of run with the Chicano movement, but for now, Cesar Chavez there in top right corner. He's about migrant workers' rights, Latinos in general, but migrant workers especially. Concerned about them being taken advantage due to language barriers, not understanding various things, whatever. Low pay, no rights when they're working. Dolores Huerta, another activist, she's working with Chavez a little bit, helping to unionize farm workers and so forth to get those better conditions. And the UFW, United Farm Workers, they're just a labor union trying to affect change by nonviolent protest here. You can see these charts, they kind of show that the Latino population in the United States is on the rise, thus they're seeking more representation and more voice. Here's Chavez talking to groups of farm workers. Peaceful protest rallies would be the method here, trying to and get better rights. Delano grape strike is one way that this happens. This is a major win against the businesses in California and elsewhere because it lasts for more than 5 years, but more importantly, it's a win for the strikers because it forces the business to the negotiating table, and they have to do what's called collective bargaining, where the union that represents the workers and the business work together to reach a conclusion on contracts, what's in, what's not in the contract, the wording, the language, the pay, the working conditions, etc. So now unions have some authority and power in terms of fighting for workers' rights and working conditions. So Delano grape strike's pretty big in that workers and the union force big companies to actually go to the negotiating table with them. Chicano movement related, but it's going to focus more on Mexican Americans. It's going to focus in part on civil rights, but also history and culture of the Chicano movement here. A little bit of quote-unquote brown power, as you guys saw on the last slide. You got the Brown Berets form. They're focusing on helping improve the community issues in the Chicano community. So you can see there housing, employment, or maybe unemployment, farmers' rights, anti-war protests, of course, against police brutality, all going to be in favor of those. You see murals popping up over the Southwest, buildings, churches, you name it. These are going to be kind of to celebrate and get out there the wonderful aspects of Chicano culture and heritage. So you're going to see this as kind of almost a nonviolent protest in the sense of celebrating Chicanos. You will have blowouts, aka strikes, in LA. There's a lot of Chicanos that are feeling as if the facilities that they use, the lack of history regarding Mexican Americans, is they're both severely lacking, and they are protesting, in effect, trying to get change here in educational reform. The American Indian movement here, this is, starts in 68, goes for about 10 years, give or take, focusing on civil rights, but they really want to draw attention to land and legal issues that Native Americans have had throughout their history. Alcatraz here, there's a provision in some treaties that says, hey, if there is federal government land that is not used, then Native Americans can have it and use it. They occupy Alcatraz here, the famous prison. Probably not going to be a popular government or popular move by the U.S. government. So this is highlighting the hypocrisy of the U.S. government in dealing with Native Americans and treaties and so forth. And just kind of highlighting the poor way they've been treated over the course of the history of the two peoples. Trail of Broken Treaties march from San Francisco to D.C. They occupy the Bureau of Indian Affairs for a week. It's again similar to Alcatraz, and it's drawing attention to, literally as the name suggests, the Broken Treaties. Maybe a little symbolism there of sorts. Connection with the Trail of Tears, in which many Native Americans suffered under President Andrew Jackson. Wounded Knee is going to be more about occupying this area until the government looks into the various conditions of the reservations. Living conditions, safety, you name it. Federal government is going to send people in, and there's going to be tension, which will culminate in a couple of American Indian movement members, Native Americans here, they're going to be killed. Longest Walk is very similar to the Trail of Broken Treaties, where there's a protest march in San Francisco going to Washington, D.C., that is just kind of bringing attention to, and again highlighting that the government has repeatedly taken advantage of broken treaties of Native Americans. Gay liberation movement, much as it is today, fighting for civil rights, discrimination ending based on sexual orientation, and just being accepted in general. Kind of highlighted by the Stonewall riots. Gay bar in New York City is raided, and it kind of provokes riots pushing for this, and then you'll see over time an increase in the movement for gay rights. Consumer movement, Ralph Nader there. It's more about consumer protections, making sure you guys, when you buy something or eat something or whatever, are safe. Your workplace is safe. OSHA's created to help with the workplace in particular, safety and health there. Think you having to wear safety glasses, having to wash your hands before doing food prep, wearing a hard hat, steel-toe boots in construction, stuff like that. He writes a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, which is about how unsafe cars are. So you'll see a lot of the changes we have today in cars are very different from, say, 50 years ago, and part of it's because of this. And you also get seatbelts and stuff like that from Ralph Nader here. So he does a pretty good job of making the consumer movement a big deal. Disability rights here. It's about expanding rights for disabled people. JFK's sister, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, she begins a camp for disabled people, which kind of morphs into the Special Olympics eventually, which is really nice because it shows that you probably don't get the Special Olympics if the support and awareness is not growing for people with disabilities. So it's a great thing there. And there's a bunch of laws out there on the books. You guys can do a little research and check them out. But a lot of laws guaranteeing equal access to education, etc. You've got the environmental movement here with Rachel Carson. What she basically does is she takes all those chemicals and stuff, and pesticides and stuff like that people don't have a clue what they are, which DDT is a big one. Check it out. It's pretty nasty stuff. It's kind of like the concept of Agent Orange. Do these things do their job? Yes, but there's a lot of nasty side effects due to the various chemicals. She, in her book Silent Spring, put that into perspective for the average person, in which people then are able to know what these things mean. EPA is also created about this time, and Earth Day as well. You've got these various acts here, which are going to basically focus on clean air, clean water, and protecting endangered animals. Cuyahoga River catches on fire. It's a nasty situation. It really just brings attention to the whole environmental issues going on. Love Canal, 3 Mile Island as well. Earth Day, keep in mind here that with all these protests, Earth Day is about protesting these environmental problems. Yes, it's about supporting the earth and celebrating it, but in particular, you've got to protect it. So therefore, Earth Day is more than anything about protesting environmental issues. Turn off the lights, walk to work, those sort of things. And the Fifth Amendment here, kind of controversial with some of the laws protecting the environment. As some people say, it's infringing upon their rights because it's private property. I own a business. Why should the government tell me how much I can or can't pollute? The kind of issue here a little bit is, what is private property? Is the air you breathe, is the water you drink private property? Typically not, so therefore your rights aren't really being violated. And there we are, guys. There's social movements. You can check them out, but That's it. If you guys have questions, feel free to send me an email.